Let's go.
What's up, everybody? Andrew Cooper here, along with Britt Flynn. No Howard Bender today, as we do Alarm Fantasy Football. He will be joining us later in the week. And we wanted to start the show off by letting you guys know some of the plans we have coming up. Big plans. As some of you have noticed, we were able to commandeer this 1 to 3 hour for football. And guess what? We're not giving it back. We're keeping it. We're going to have a couple different shows coming up here. I'm going to have a show from 1 to 2. Britt's going to have a show from 2 to 3. That's all starting on Friday. For now, we're still going to keep going with, we have lightning round, we have quick out, we have this show, but just know that 1 to 3 on this channel is going to be for football every day, every weekday, and you're going to get one of us. So I figured today we could start this show by talking about us a little bit, just for the people that don't know us. I know we always see some familiar faces in the chat. Scampers, Toronto Dave already in here. But people might not know who we are, Britt. So, Britt, why don't you take a second just to let people know how you got started with fantasy football, what you did before, and just a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I've always loved football. That was mine and my dad's thing. I remember him like picking me up, Britt, come watch the Cowboys with me. Like, come sit by me on the couch and da da da. And I got very spoiled very early with the '90s iteration of the Cowboys dynasty, and have been waiting on a comeback ever since. But aside from that, my first time playing fantasy football was just because there was somebody who left a league and they needed a last minute replacement. I knew nothing about fantasy football, but I did know enough about football that I was pretty good. And so ended up making it to the finals. I still blame Tony Romo and his back injury for not winning that championship. And then I just kind of started shouting into the void on Twitter after I got involved in more and more leagues. And that evolved into what it is today. So, yeah, pretty thankful for Twitter. As as bad as things have gotten over there, it did give me my first platform. So,
It's funny how that works because my first platform for talking about football was actually Reddit. I would go and I would comment stuff, and then people would be like, "Oh, this should be its own post." And then I eventually started making my own posts, and then I met John and Bemba, and he was like, "This should be an article." He's like, "Why are you doing this for free?" And I was like, "I don't know." I'm like, "I just thought that I was just talking about football with my friends." So eventually, I got to that point. Before that, I went to school for finance and accounting, became a loan officer, did commercial appraisals, became like the VP of acquisitions or whatever. I did everything that I was supposed to do. And every day I would go and do that job and then leave and I would do this job. And I liked it so much better. We'd be closing on big properties and I wouldn't care. But then somebody would say to me in the DMs, they would say, "Hey, I won my fantasy league and you were a big part of that." And that to me meant more than any of those, any real estate or being a slumlord or whatever. So eventually decided to come and do this full time. So, hey, it's working out great. We got Jack in the chat. We got Toronto Dave. We got Dame Overboard. Britt. So why don't you give the listeners a little preview, if possible, of what your show is going to be, what you want it to be? Because I mean, the way it goes with shows sometimes is they evolve into what the viewers want it to be, what the listeners want it to be, and sometimes not even what you originally wanted it to be. But at this stage, what do you kind of want your show to be? What's some of your plans?
yeah, I think with a lot of these shows, you can basically do a roulette wheel of any kind of fantasy show, and half of them are going to be the same. They're all going to have the same talking points, the same segments. I don't want my show to be that way. I want my show to showcase both what I know about fantasy, but put a unique spin on it and incorporate what I enjoy in life as a person, like dogs, like concerts, hiking, being outdoors, things like that. And so I'm trying to incorporate segments that merge fantasy with these extracurricular hobbies. And I'm pretty excited for some of the stuff that I've got planned and coming up. And I think it's going to be real cool. But what about you? Because I know that you've got some real fun stuff coming up as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've always wanted because I've done shows with you, I've done shows with John, and I've always just wanted a show that was focused on making people better at fantasy football, not necessarily telling you who to draft, which we do in the articles and the rankings and everything, but a show that's focused on what's most important, on things that can make you a better fantasy gamer so that when you walk away from this show, you don't need to pull up the rankings. You know the things that I think are important, the things that we at Fantasy Alarm think are important, and you can be better at this game yourself. So my show is going to focus on a lot of that. We're going to have a lot of guests today. Since we don't have our Bender with us, we're going to fill that void by having a couple guests. We're going to have Billy Muzio on from Player Profiler. We're going to have Joey Wright on from Football Guys and Front Yard Fantasy. So we're going to have a lot of guests on both shows. We're going to be doing a lot of fun stuff. We're going to be talking about some ADP. Before we get to all that, let's get into some news, right, Britt? Because coming out of this weekend, it's amazing that even in July, there's so much moving and shaking that there's a lot to talk about. So first thing first, the big one, right? DeAndre Hopkins comes out, signs a pretty decent sized deal, right? 2 years, 26 million with a lot of incentives, right? So what I usually do when something like this happens is I go over to FFPC and check out the ADP over there because those guys over there are real high limit, high end experts. Their leagues over there, the main event, $2,000 buy-in where the winner gets $1 million. And when you have a big buy-in like that, there's not as many teams as some of these other ones where you're throwing $5 against the wall and playing against a ton of people. You have a realistic shot of winning some of these ones. So I go over there and I check out what the ADP is like over there for a player like this and what the players around them are looking like. So when I check that out, you see DeAndre Hopkins going at wide receiver 56.1. That's ADP. So he's 56 off the board, wide receiver 22. Around him are guys like Calvin Ridley at wide receiver 17, Debo at wide receiver 18, Christian Watson, wide receiver 21, even DJ Moore going slightly after him, wide receiver 23. I don't necessarily know if I like any of those guys better than what we might get from Hopkins. I mean, Ridley's coming off an entire year that he missed, a year and a half almost. Debo's in he's got a quarterback situation that's all over the place. Christian Watson, again, Jordan Love starting his first games. DJ Moore on a Bears team that is, throwing the ball at a leather helmet era level. And then Terry McLaurin playing with Sam Howell. So I look at that ADP personally. And even though the Titans aren't known for throwing it a ton, I can't really have Hopkins behind a lot of those guys. I might end up being higher on him than most people. And if you're with me, then you should go over to FFPC where you can see more of this data and you can sign up for the FFPC best ball and other contests. Go to myffpc.com, use promo code ALARM, and first time depositors get an instant $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now, Britt, with those names I listed, Ridley, Debo, Watson, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, are you taking any of those guys over Hopkins? I mean, are any of those guys high on your list?
I think I would still go Ridley. I like him and I like what I've seen, albeit it is in gym shorts. We haven't seen him in pads yet, but from what I've seen, he looks really good. Another thing to mention is that this ADP changes daily and it's updated over on fantasyalarm.com. You can check it out. The movement that we've seen in just 2 days, Hopkins ADP has already jumped so much. And I think it's going to continue to jump because people are like, well, he's a wide receiver one on a team. And people kind of forget that the last time that Ryan Tannehill had a bona fide wide receiver one and wide receiver two, he threw for over 3,000. I think it was 3,800 yards. And Derrick Henry still had over 2,000 yards. So it's very possible that this offense is going to be firing on all cylinders. So maybe Calvin Ridley, but other than that, it's D Hop for me all the way.
Yeah, I checked out it's funny. I was going through that list and I was listing guys that are close to him. And there's actually one player going after all those guys that I kind of really like, which is Deontay Johnson. Oddly, on over on FFPC, he's going like wide receiver like 28, and he's had 140 targets 3 years in a row. And FFPC is full point PPR. So when I look at that, I'm like, I don't know. There's a few of those guys that are just off my list. Like right now, I can't draft Debo if DraftKings is gonna set his over under at 725 yards and we don't even know who the quarterback is gonna be, I couldn't possibly take him ahead of some of those other guys. So that's where I stand on that. I did check out DraftKings. Connor Allen actually of 4for4 sent out an update with some of the new numbers, and they actually moved Hopkins down slightly. They have him listed at 850 yards. Caesar still has him at 725. But Britt, this is the one that jumps off to me and where I think it's actionable right away. Caesars has the over under for receiving touchdowns at DeAndre Hopkins at 3.5. And you can get the over at minus 105. Is that
That's so incredibly low.
it
That's
seems
so
crazy.
incredibly low. I think that people are in this mindset that Tennessee is such a run first offense that nobody else can score touchdowns ever. Like never, never, ever. But that's not the way that the game works. Like, yes, Derrick Henry is going to get his fair share of touchdowns, but at that little of a number? Are you kidding me?
It's crazy. It's crazy. 3.5, man. And especially for his style of play, where people worry about these guys that, when they get old, and certain play styles do not translate long term. Like an example would be your own Des Bryant, right? Like he was such a physical guy and he like really thrived on taking slants and taking him to the house. But as soon as you lose some of that mobility, you have the foot issues, it's hard for that guy to play for a long time. But I look at what Hopkins does as far as use his body and use his space and basically become a rebounder at times. That's how you got guys like Anquan Bolden that played for a million years, Larry Fitzgerald. I guess once you play for the Cardinals for a little bit, you just become a guy that can play till you're 35, maybe. But so
The
like
and the thing that I will say that I am a little bit kind of not concerned about, but I think that there's gonna be a difference in his style of play, is that I think that he maybe moved to the slot more than he has been in the past. He's always been that vertical threat, he's always been that X receiver. I think in this offense, he has a decent chance of taking a lot more slot snaps, and maybe that's what Vegas is thinking, because you're not gonna get a ton of contested catches out of the slot, especially with a guy as big as he is. And maybe that's factoring into his low touchdown prop. But I mean, come on, he's DeAndre Hopkins. He,
exactly.
the Hail Murray situation.
Yeah.
Like he can beat anybody at any given time. And I don't think that there's any way that he hits under that number.
For sure. And as we have pointed out here in the chat from Fatty, what's up, brother? He says that Tennessee has a new offensive scheme. That is true. Tim Kelly has been promoted to the offensive coordinator, and he was the pass game coordinator, which anytime in fantasy football, that's what I want to see. I want to see the guy who likes passing the ball get moved into that job. I want to see former NFL quarterbacks or college quarterbacks getting those jobs because those are the guys that like to go three wide and sling the rock. Luckily for us, Howard Bender is going to be coming out with his offensive scheme articles soon. Those are my absolute favorite. It's a must read because he goes through each team every year and he updates what kind of offense it is. Is it West Coast? Is it Erhard Perkins? Is it Air Raid? Is it some other crazy thing that has a funny nickname? Like he goes through, figures the whole thing out, tells you with this scheme, this is where the ball is likely to go and breaks the whole thing down. That's in our draft guide at fantasyalarm.com. That's available now. It's a living draft guide, so you get all the rankings that are up there now. You get all the articles coming out as we move on. My tight end series is going to be in there. All our stuff's going to be in there. So check that out now. But my first impression on when you take the pass game coordinator and you move him up and you go out and you sign DeAndre Hopkins is that this isn't going to be the same offense that just ran it into the ground a million times. So I'm moving up Ryan Tannehill, Britt. Unfortunately, I went early quarterback in the Scott Fish Bowl, and our buddy Jester got a really good discount on Tannehill. Would you be willing to move him? He goes outside the top 20. Would you be willing to move him towards the back end of that top 20, or are you still kind of hesitant on Tannehill?
I'm not necessarily hesitant on him. I think that he still has QB2 upside. Definitely a value at where you're getting him or where you got him prior to the signing. But a lot of his QB1 scores were based on his rushing touchdowns. And I don't necessarily know that he still has that ability in him at this time in his career. But that's even better for these pass catchers and for Derrick Henry. If he can still hang out behind that line of scrimmage, if these other guys can pass block for him, I think he's going to be just fine. Just he's obviously not going to be a QB1, but getting him outside the top 32, I mean, that's just a pure steal.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm taking him at Tannehill, and I'm putting him in the group where I say I will take him in Superflex. I will take him in best ball, 18 plus round best ball leagues where you have to draft two or three guys, but there's just no need to use a roster spot on him. But keep an eye on him on the waiver wire, right? Maybe a watch list type guy at best. George in the chat pointing out, there's a Boston boy for you. I was hanging out with him this weekend at the Boston live draft. He's saying Titans' last wide receiver to break 1,100 yards in the season was Drew Bennett in 2004.
But
My
AJ Brown
goodness.
almost got there, and he missed like 2 or 3 games that season. So I think that that is a little bit skewed. I think that it can happen this season.
Yeah, a little skewed, but at the same time, the sentiment that the Titans have not been a passing team, I mean, that's true. So we'll have to see. I think Treylon Burks is going to be okay. The top two guys are usually fine. It's the guys that are third and fourth on the pecking order that get hurt a bit there, and that hurts me because I had a lot of hope in Chigakonkwo. He goes to me. He ends up being on the back burner a little bit now, where we're still holding him in dynasty because we like the talent, but that window for him to be a top two target on the team, he either needs an injury or he needs Hopkins to age out or something to happen on that front. It's kind of like where Dallas Goddard is. I had Chig kind of close to Goddard because Chig could be a top two target on his team. But now that they're both the third target on his team and one of them gets to play with Jalen Hurts versus Ryan Tannehill, it's not as close anymore. We got to adjust to these things. It's unfortunate. But anyway, let's move on. Next news. Another tight end that is a favorite of mine, Evan Ingram, got paid. He got paid the money he deserves, 3 years, $42 million. Great for him personally. For fantasy football, it's kind of mixed bag, but I want to get your opinion on this because with Dynasty, it can be so hard to find guys that are reliable, but it's even harder to find upside. Would you, if let's say you were a somebody who rosters Evan Ingram, would you rather him play out the year with the Jags and then hit free agency, or would you rather that you get the kind of certainty that he's going to be with Trevor Lawrence for a little while and sign this deal? What do you think? What would you prefer if you had him on your dynasty team?
See, I think I would rather just him play this 1 year and then go find somebody else because he's aging. And although we've seen people like Travis Kelce defy those odds, there's an apex that comes with every single position. And the older you get, the more damage that your body takes. You're it's just going to catch up to you. Now that they have Calvin Ridley, now that they have Christian Kirk tied up, even Travis Etienne, who I'm personally off of, but he's still in line for targets. I don't necessarily see that pathway for Evan Ingram getting all of the targets that we need for him to be a week to week fantasy asset.
Yeah, that's the problem you run into with the third target. And people, they'll say, "Hey, he was the third target last year." Technically, Christian Kirk and Zay Jones got more targets than him, but in many of those games, he was either the leading target or second target getter. What you run into when you're not playing best ball is inconsistency as the third target. There were some games, it was basically I was looking at it when I was doing my rankings and I would say, okay, is someone going to vaporize Zay Jones, which was prone to happen when he played Sauce Gardner, when he played Jeff Okuda, he was completely taken out of those games. In those games, we moved Ingram up. In the other games, we had to look at it and say, okay, well, this might be a Christian Kirk game, might be a Zay Jones game. You can't really trust guys like that from week to week. And now that Ridley is in that Zay Jones role, with Zay Jones moving over to the Marvin Jones role, unfortunately, even as big of an Ingram fan as I am, I have to essentially either fade him at ADP, or if I draft him at ADP, I'm taking a second guy that has just super high risk, high reward upside. So Evan Ingram, great for him to get paid. He deserves it. Hopefully that moves the needle for these tight end contracts moving forward. Because, at tight end and running back, it's been the same story. If you have a good one, franchise tag them because it's the average of the top 5 contracts. And that number is almost always going to be affordable for both positions. I mean, look at tight end, Schultz, Ingram, Gesicki, like even not using Gesicki, 10 mil for a guy like that. Absolutely. And now we see it with running back Britt, with these guys, and even Joe Mixon now taking a pay cut to stay. So another piece of big news from this weekend: Joe Mixon taking less money not only this year but next year to be part of this team to build something great. As a Bengals fan, you got to be pumped. As a Joe Mixon dynasty fan, you probably got to be pumped too, right, Britt?
Yeah, I think that he probably took a look around and saw all of these running backs still on the free agent market for like months and months and months. And not only that, but the ones threatening to hold out because the running back market is just not a position that people are willing to pay. They're going straight up goodwill on these running back contracts. And if you want to remain in a team that is in contention, which he wants to do, then you're going to have to figure out what you want. Do you want money, which you're probably not going to get even in the free agency market, or do you want to get a championship? And I think that that's where his mindset ended up. He wants to be on a team that has the ability to win a championship before he's aged out of the league.
Yeah, and that's honestly, if you look at, I wonder if he maybe spoke to Le'Veon Bell, because he signs this deal, right? And which is essentially just taking less money to stay with the team, to stay with the fans that like him, to stay in a situation that's working well for him, where he has been, honestly, if you look at the points per game number in full PPR, a top 10 back 2 years in a row now. He might have talked to Le'Veon Bell because Le'Veon actually came out and said something this weekend as well. You wonder if maybe he had this heart to heart with guys like Mixon, any of these other guys that are asking, should I hold out? Should I stay? And, he turned around and said, hey, just so you guys know, I never actually apologized to the fans. And Le'Veon said, I'm going to take a moment to apologize to the fans and to a certain degree the organization. Though he didn't quite go as far as to apologize to the Steelers, right? But he apologized to the fans. The thing about what Le'Veon Bell did, and I want to get your opinion on this, Britt, is that people say that he, ruined his legacy, or he might have messed up his own statistics, or even left money on the table. But if you really think about what he did, he got $41 million from the Steelers and Jets, and then he went and played a couple extra years with the Chiefs and Ravens. But let's leave that out. Just the money that he got from the Steelers from for the franchise tag, and then from the Jets was $41 million. Guys like Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, and Alvin Kamara in their career so far have all made under 33 million. So almost 10 million less. And those guys, we're looking at them and saying, are they almost done? Is this almost up? So I have to ask you, with the Le'Veon Bell situation, what side do you fall on? Do you fall on the side of like, okay, this guy secured generational wealth and he might have done the right thing, or do you think he would have been better off to have taken whatever the Steelers offered and tried to have a longer career, maybe tried to win a little more? Because the Jets, he got paid a lot of money to play with the Jets, but that was a disaster statistically and in terms of winning football games.
Well, I think that also the running back market has changed so much. So maybe back then he did the right thing, but telling a player in today's NFL to do the same thing that he did, that's not going to get it done. There, the market has completely flipped on its head. We saw it with the Zeke contract. Everybody was like, why did you pay him this much? Why did you do this? Why, they were just verklempt about his entire contract, and we've seen it go down year after year. So I think that even though perhaps Bell did the right thing in giving that same advice to a running back in today's NFL would not work out the same way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, is that we've seen, as a Patriots fan, I've seen it a number of times where players decide to go after the money, and it turns out that maybe they weren't that good, and maybe it was more the system. Like a guy like Deion Branch, for instance, wins Super Bowl MVP and decides to go chase the money, and his career's over within a couple of years. Had he had stayed in the system that was working for him, maybe it lasts longer. So something to think about if you're these players. Mixon's going one way. We'll have to see what way the other guys go. Fortunately, today we're talking about running backs in the first hour, and we're bringing Billy Muzio, player profiler, on at about 140 or so, because we know that those guys love to do their deep dives over there. We know the Podfather Matt Kelly always gets into that. We know that Anand Nanduri over there, he loves talking contracts, and Billy has become one of my absolute favorites. He said he wanted to talk about running backs today, so we're going to get him on here and we're going to ask him about all of those guys coming up shortly. For before we get into that, Brett, what I want to do is, why don't we talk about what our running back strategy is in the modern NFL and kind of set the stage with that, and then we'll get Billy on and we'll see where there's some overlap. We know that you this year have been I feel like you've got a pretty deep dive headfirst into the anchor RB. Some people call it hero RB, but your article on that is amazing in the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and let us know why this year, compared to others, because in the past, you and I we've been kind of robust RB type folks. Maybe not going crazy, but we're usually pretty safe. This year, you're playing it fast and loose. And after reading your article in my Scott Fishbowl draft, I actually went with the anchor RB there as well. Even though I've been kind of on the fence about whether it's really the way to go or not. But so this year, what made you look at the current landscape, the current ADPs, and decide, you know what, this might be the year for it?
Well, the landscape is the big thing, right? Because we've seen so many leagues gravitate instead of two running back positions, two wide receiver positions, you get three wide receiver positions and only two running backs. So, for one, you're going to have to shore up that RB3 spot in addition to your flexes. So, I really wanted to have that just filled out. And then I did a big deep dive and the weirdness in my brain that made me decide to do this. I was like, let's just see what the return on ADP was from these, round 1 through 3 running backs, the round 4 through 7, which is the quote dead zone. And then after that, and how much value could you get from the eighth round on? I came to the realization that these top running backs in rounds 1 through 3 with very little risk, almost always provided value plus or minus to like ADP spots. The mid round, with the exception of Josh Jacobs, who was absolutely incredible last season and finished as RB3, the rest of them stunk. The rest of them drug your team down. And I even eliminated injuries from that equation. If you missed 5 or more games, you were not put into that. And they still all let you down. Then the rounds 8 and on, because of the volatility of the running back position, with the studs getting hurt, the committee approach that the NFL uses basically across the board now, there was so much more value to be had from the eighth round on, especially with pass catching running backs. Let me just tell you, if you grab yourself a pass catching running back in rounds 8 on, I feel like you're set. And that return was so much bigger. We saw Miles Sanders being drafted in that range. We saw Jerick McKinnon being drafted in that range, several more that are in the article in the draft guide. Um, and by doing that and by waiting on running back, just having one stud, you can fill out the rest of your roster with stud quarterbacks, with stud tight ends, with stud wide receivers, potentially breakout wide receivers. Those positions aren't nearly as volatile as running back is. And it we've seen it in real life how NFL teams don't really waste draft capital on running backs in real life. So why would we do that in fantasy when they just rotate them in and out? And the numbers kind of prove that after I finished it. And I hate it because I loved being a robust running back drafter, but the numbers just don't add up anymore.
Yeah, and I've been, as you know, I've been tracking kind of the over unders for wide receivers, comparing them to ADP, and I think a big part of why wide receivers are moving up this year. If you look at 2021, there were a ton of wide receivers in the early going that missed their over under numbers. Tyree, like if you look at the top 7 guys in 2021, the only one that hit the over was Devonta Adams. Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley. I mean, Calvin Ridley missed it by a country mile, right? Like he didn't even play. DK Metcalf missed his. If you look at last year, it was so much safer. If you look at the top 10 guys, 7 of them hit their over under. And the ones that didn't were Cooper Cup, who was amazing while he was playing, right? He finished as a wide receiver 2, despite only playing half the season. Jamar Chase, who got injured, and he still had over 1,000 yards. Debo Samuel was the big miss, right? So he was in that group where, and again, Vegas didn't even have him set that high. They had him set at 925. He didn't hit it. But and then Keenan Allen, he was at 11 and he didn't hit it. But again, over the second half of the season, he was wide receiver 2 overall. Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, they all hit the overs. Like if you last year went robust RB and then loaded up on wide receivers, or just straight up went wide receivers early, you probably did pretty well. And I think people are looking around this year and seeing that and saying, I want to replicate that success. Is it going to work? I don't know. But we do know that the way the position's trending, it's a lot safer. So I want to talk about the process here. And one thing that I feel like has plagued fantasy analysts, I struggled with this for a long time myself, is analyzing all positions the same. right? We look at a position like wide receiver versus something like tight end, and we know that it shouldn't be analyzed the same, but people try and do it. They try and just say, "Oh, yards per route run," and targets are earned, and this guy should, right? Like that. That's the one that where you look at wide receiver. Of course, that works at wide receiver because every team is going to have three guys out there, and if you're the best one, you're going to get the ball. But that's not how it works at tight end with the different schemes and the blocking and all that. And running back should be analyzed completely differently as well, right? So the way I look at it a lot of times is we need to know what the scheme is, how does this guy fit within the scheme, and is this team going to be in a position to have to throw the ball a lot? Are they going to be in a position like the Lions last year where you're going to get all those touchdowns if you're the lead running back? Is there a mobile quarterback that is going to steal touches, steal carries? These are the things that don't necessarily apply to a wide receiver or when you're analyzing a quarterback, but is actually huge for the running back. So, in your experience, Britt, what are some of the little tricks that you've been using when you're trying to find these later guys, where it's like, okay, we know all the bell cow studs are gone. How do I find a high leverage role here? How do I find something in these later rounds where I can turn around and in my format know that I'm going to get the points that I need for this format?
Well, the first one is obviously pass catching running backs. The pass catching value of a running back is almost a point more per reception versus per carry. And now different leagues have kind of switched that up and tried to make it equal. Like in Scott Fishbowl, for example, you get 0.25 points per carry. So it's kind of evening that out to give the running backs a little bit more level playing ground. But in your average league, that's not something that's going to happen. So I look for the pass catching running backs. I look for the guys who are the goal line backs, potentially the third round backs or third down backs, because if all you need is short yardage, then you've got it on the goal line. Like that's what we saw with Jamal Williams every single time that Amon-Ra St. Brown went down at like the 1 yard line last
Crazy.
season.
Him and
If there was an
Swift.
award, yeah, if there was an award for almost touchdowns, Amon-Ra St. Brown would have had that in the bag by miles. And then I also look at just kind of I look at the offensive line. I want to know what that offensive line looks like and how those limited touches are going to translate. So for Jalen Warren, for example, we know that Najee Harris is the bell cow back in Pittsburgh, but Jalen Warren had almost a 5 yards per carry average. He didn't touch the ball a lot, but when he did, he was very efficient. And that was kind of behind a like makeshift offensive line. So if I'm looking at him this season, I'm looking at him as more of a handcuff, maybe even a sprinkle in like burst out back. There's just so many different things that you can use to analyze. And that's why offensive systems and schemes are so important and why the draft guide offensive system articles are so important to read.
It's huge, yeah, and that's the thing is that's why we have those coming up with Howard, and I do the RB questionnaire. We talked about it on the show, where if you go in there and you split it up into roles, right? So some teams, it's just going to say Saquon Barkley across the board. He's the guy, and then Matt Breida is the next guy, and Eric Gray is the next guy, and it doesn't matter as much there because if it's a 2 minute drill in a high leverage situation, it's Saquon. If it's a pass interference in the end zone, you got to send somebody down to slam dunk it. It's Saquon. Other teams, I look at it and say, okay, how is this going to be split up? And then once you do that first and separate it and say, okay, Damian Pierce is the early down back, Devin Singletary is the pass down back. What who is going to benefit the most? Right. Sometimes you got to look at it and say, is this team going to be the Lions? Like David Montgomery, assuming your boy Frank Ragno's toe is all right. Do we have an update on that, Britt?
Still no update that I've heard, but I don't know. I think he'll be all right.
All right. Well, yeah, you got the Arkansas
Train
Connect.
Training camp is going to be very important to
Yes.
watch that.
If he's out there every day, if he's out there every day and there's no limitations and everything, and the beat writers are saying that he's fine, then I'm not worried about it. But if that turf toe can be tough, so we'll have to see on that. But a team like that, I look at David Montgomery and I'm like, yeah, give me that. That team's probably going to score a lot of touchdowns, just like they did last year. Is he going to have 17? No, obviously not. Like eh, you can't just take those touchdowns and give them to him. But Jared Goff doesn't take it himself. Jahmyr Gibbs is a rookie, so I think David Montgomery should be fine in that aspect. Some of these other teams, you look at the Cardinals or the Texans, those teams are set to be so bad. How many rushing touchdowns can we really give to them? So I'm with you, Britt, on the passing down backs. I want to ask you about a couple of them here. So again, once again, like I talked about earlier in the show, what I do at this time of year when it's July is I pull up the FFPC. That is a site where these guys are taking it pretty seriously. This is a real home for high stakes gamers. I mean, you can play games from as little as 5 up to $5,000 there. And the main slate where you win $1,000,000 is 2 grand. So I at this stage I trust that ADP. When we get a little closer, maybe you go to the platform you're playing on and check that one. But I don't trust that ADP until those drafts start happening. Right now, though, with the high stakes drafts, that's what I trust. So I went through their data over at FPC and I pulled some later round guys, some of them that I know you like, but there's a few of them that are kind of in the same space. So you have Antonio Gibson going around ADP 100, round 9, and Samaje Perine also going around 9. A little later on, you got Devin A. Chain going around 11, Jerick McKinnon also going around 11. Then a little deeper, Tank Bigsby goes in 12th, 13th round, Devin Singletary, 13th round. These are all pass catching backs. They're all sharp players. If those ADPs jump out to you and you say, oh my God, you can get Devin Singletary in the 13th round, then you should go over to FFPC and go to myffpc.com. Use promo code ALARM, and first time depositors will get an instant $25 when you deposit 35 or more. You can get in on best ball, get in on any other contest they have going on right now. It is an awesome place to play, and it really is a home for high stakes gamers. That's why I use the ADP. But Britt, let me ask you. So, like, you're in the 9th round. I know you love both of these players, ADP 100 and ADP 102. So you got to make a choice. Are you going Antonio Gibson, your boy, or Samaje Perine, who you've also talked up pretty heavily?
This is such a hard question to answer because in so many drafts, I've ended up getting both of them. Um,
Right.
and I think that they're like my twins and my favorite children. I can't pick my favorite.
Sweet
Um,
angels.
yeah. I think though I'm gonna have to go Antonio Gibson out of the two of them, just because when Javonte Williams comes back, we've seen him excel as a pass catcher as well. We don't exactly know what the role going forward in Sean Payton's offense is going to be. And I think that Antonio Gibson is going to be there as the solidified pass catching back for the entire season. So there's just a little bit more security with going with Gibson there.
Right, yeah, especially I think that's the tiebreaker for these type contests. Like, if you're gonna play the main event and try and win the big money, you do care more about the end of the season, so, yeah, Gibson a little safer there. What about the other ones? We got, Devon Achane, obviously crazy speed, and then Jerick McKinnon, who quietly amassed a huge number of receptions, was essentially, on a per game basis, an RB1. Uh, are you and they're both going around 11 picks 122 and 123 in these sharp leagues over on FFPC. Got to pick one, Britt.
I think I'm going Jarek McKinnon still. I know that he's a little bit older. I know that Eric Bieniemy is now gone, but the Miami backfield, especially with the Dalvin Cook situation still hanging over everything, like he actually might get signed. And if he gets signed, then A Chain's value is toast. So I would rather go with the guy who I think is still going to get a ton of the targets. And then you look around at Kansas City's wide receiving room. There's a bunch of smaller slot guys. They don't really have the big, explosive X receiver. And so I think a lot of those targets are still going to go to McKinnon.
I just took McKinnon in the Scott Fishbowl, so I'm glad that was your answer on that one. All right, last one, and then we're gonna bring in our buddy Billy Muzio over from Player Profiler. We're gonna have him pop in here at 140. So last one here, you can go Tank Bigsby in round 12 or Devin Singletary round 13, and it's close enough that again, once you get to this range of the draft, you got to pick your guy. Odds are good that if you take one, you don't get the other. So pick one of these two, Tank or Singletary.
So I'm actually going tank. I'm avoiding my own advice here because I know that Singletary is the pass catching back out of the two, but we saw it last year with Jermichael Hasty. ETN didn't get those goal line carries. It was Jermichael Hasty. And I think that Bigsby fills into that role this year. And he really excelled in college on a pretty bad Auburn team. I think that there's a lot more to him than we're seeing. And again, we'll know more as training camp goes on. Um, Stay tuned to my training camp battle article because I'm going to be updating that all day, every day, as soon as training camp starts in the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide. But at this point, on the better offense, I lean Bigsby.
Well, I gotta say, Britt, I took Devin Singletary in the Scott Fish Bowl over Tank Bigsby, so I'm mad at you, and because of that, I'm bringing on Billy Muzio, and hopefully he agrees with me, or else I'll be mad at him. So let's get our special guest on here and find out what he does at running back, and find out how much he likes my Scott Fish Bowl team and how much he likes me. Billy, what's up, brother? Always good to talk to you, man. How you doing today?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate the invites. Just got back from vacation, ready to just jump back into the swing of things.
Oh, where'd you go on vacation?
I was on vacation last week at a golf tournament. So went down, picked up my buddy, flew down to pick him up in California, flew back, and then we played golf for about 4 days. So got a lot of sun, drank a lot of whiskey, but back in the swing of things, ready to talk some football.
Attaboy, dude. That's nice. You gotta go and hang with the boys every once in a while, swing some clubs, man.
That's
So
right.
that's good, dude. And we got you on. We're talking running back philosophy. We laid out some of our stuff. I've told you, made it pretty clear that I love what you guys do over at Player Profile. You guys have a great group. I use your database all the time. I love the quick and easy screenshot thing with the workout metrics. So I
Yeah.
can just be it's so hard to sit there and explain an article like, hey, this guy's big and strong. It's so much easier just to post a picture that has like a little chart and it says like I'm like 94th percentile. Is that good? Like everybody shut up. Right. So it's just much easier for me. So we appreciate what you guys do over there. But for you personally, when you're doing running back this year, people are getting a little crazy with the zero and hero RBs. Have you bought into that? I mean, do you generally go RB early? Do you generally go late, or are you more of somebody that you're kind of like water? You take value when it's there and you figure it out after.
Yeah, my motto is Bruce Lee, be water, my friend, and you need to
Yes.
be fluid. You have to be able to kind of read the room because if you go in with a strategy and try to stick to that strategy, and if the room is not allowing for it, you're going to be competing for the same positions, and you're going to see value fall in other areas, and other smart, sharp players are going to pick up value at those spots. So I'm a firm believer in being fluid. I'm a firm believer in seeing what the room does and adjusting my plan accordingly while I'm in the drafts. Like I may have a plan, and I think it's wise to go into every draft with a plan. But you may enter an FFPC draft, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, four running backs go off earlier than you anticipated. And now the value is at running back or wide receiver. I mean, and then the value might be tight end. And so you never know what's going to happen. Was it Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the
They get
face.
punched in the face. Yeah.
And the same thing happens in a draft room, right? You may go in thinking that, hey, this is a wide receiver heavy room. I'm going to go double tap running back on the turn. And maybe both those running backs go early. So you need to adjust. So I also have the benefit of going, mass volume inside of a lot of draft rooms. And so I can get pretty creative here. But if I'm doing one or two drafts, I think it's still important to stay very fluid and adjust your plan.
There you go. Poker player Billy Muzio wants to read the room in his drafts. Who would have guessed that would be the case, right?
Never.
Yes. So
Yeah, and I think what you said rings true because we saw you draft at the FSGA and you were picking dead last at 14th and Cooper Cup was still there for you. And I
crazy.
think that that's so insane. And who I can't remember, but who were you
I'm on
originally going to go for?
I was
You were
originally
going to
going to go
go
for
for St.
Amon-Ra
Brown?
St. Brown because I had no idea that Cooper Kupp was going to land me at 14. So I was thinking I was going to get like St. Brown or AJ Brown, double tap at the turn, but you got to adjust, and you're never gonna say, hey, I'm going to pass up Cooper Kupp because he wasn't in my plans to build him this draft, right? It's at 14, that's a steal, and you're never going to see him there again, so you have to take him.
And then you still got Jahmyr Gibbs in the third, which
Yeah.
was, oh my gosh, full PPR, target monster city between those three. It's absolutely insane. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what you did for your Scott Fishbowl draft. So walk me through your process at running back. It looks like at the 7-12, you took James Conner.
Yeah,
Um,
I went a little unconventional in this draft. So just so the listeners know, started 3 tight ends, my first 4 picks.
Love it.
And then came back around and took running back later, as Britt just mentioned, 7-12, James Conner. The reason behind it, for people who are not in the Scott Fishbowl, is there is a super tight end premium here. And we're talking, so normally Scott Fishbowl is full PPR. Tight end gets an additional point per reception. So you get 2 points per catch. And then you also get 1 point for first down. Tight ends get an additional point for first downs. So a tight end first down catch for 10 yards is 5 fantasy points in the Scott Fishbowl. So, of course, I locked in Kelsey, Kittle, and Waller, played a little bully tight end here because quarterbacks went off the board early and often. Came back around, needed running back in the 7th round, as Britt mentioned. 7-12, James Conner fell to me, which was nice. I was so happy to see Isaiah Pacheco and Madison go ahead, who are further down my board than I have on James Conner. I know that Arizona's not going to be the greatest this year, but we know that James Conner is going to have an out on his contract next year. This could be a scenario that we saw last year from Josh Jacobs. They just run him to the ground. They use a lot of carries. They're going to use him in the passing game because they're down weapons. They're going to use him in the rushing game until he's able to, until the wheels fall off with James Conner. I think that we can expect him to see a bulk of the carries in this backfield because there really is not a lot behind him. The only person worth mentioning is Keontae Ingram, who I just took at 20.1 inside the Scott Fishbowl to secure that backfield, just in case we do see a James Conner injury, because it's very possible. We know that he's had some health concerns throughout his career. But I want to make sure that I secure that backfield because it's a weak spot of mine. This running back core, I should say, is weak for my team. And I think that James Conner is going to give himself a good chance to be a top 20 back.
Yeah, I love what you did here with I mean, obviously I love the tight ends, man. As you know, I look at that.
Liking tight ends never.
Well, the thing is,
newsflash: the tight end whisperer loves what you did at tight end.
You only got 3 out of your first 4 picks, though. You should have gone 4.
I almost did, actually. I was like, but then we're sitting one. You got the flex spots here, so I'm filling up the roster here.
Yeah, well, in my draft, the Boston live draft where everybody has my rankings and everyone's trying to be mean to me because it's funny. Kelsey went early and Mike Fiala took Waller right before my pick. He picked 1 spot before me. So I actually, tight end, I'm piecing it together later on. Nobody was letting me have fun in my draft. So glad to see one of us got to take advantage of the settings there. I mean, that's crazy. Darren Waller in the 4th round it's magical in this format because he could lead that team in targets, right? And
he will lead the team in targets.
He will lead the team in targets. His points are worth double. Like if you really think about it, like Jalen Hyatt is, he's a rookie, but it could be interesting. Wando Robinson's interesting, but he's coming off a knee injury. So it's like, Sterling Shepard can never stay healthy. It really is looking like it's shaping up pretty good for Waller. And you know what? You survived at quarterback too. Your league should not have let you get to, guys like Jordan Love and Kenny Pickett. Somebody should have stepped in and really they should have made you pay for the way you started, and they didn't. So you could be all right here. But again, this is a running back show. So I want to talk to you about, I love the strategy that you did here. We talked about it last week where a guy that won SFB 9, Gary Haddow, he punted 1 position. And then in starting the 13th round, he took 4 in a row. For him, it was tight end. And he just needed to hit 1. And he just so happened to take Darren Waller. And then later that month, Antonio Brown brought a fake helmet to practice and froze his feet off. And a lot of targets opened up really quickly, right? So with you at running back, you seem to have a similar strategy where you didn't, even though you waited and made it your last priority position, you didn't ignore the value at tight end. I'm sorry, at wide receiver. So you took James Conner, Rachaad White, who could be all 3 down backs, right? Yeah. And then you took Kadarius Toney, Mike Evans, Gabe Davis, Jameson Williams, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore in that same ghost ship offense. I just took Rondale Moore in mine as well. And then you turned around and said, all right, let's go. 0 RB time, load up the bench with upside. So talk to us about your process. You already mentioned Keontae Ingram is within this group, but talk to us some of these guys and why you think there's a possibility that these could be the guys that, really, as long as one of James Conner or Rachaad White is solid, you just need one of these guys to become a thing, and you're looking really good.
Yeah, you're just dead on right here. I just punted the position, and I made sure that I got myself 2 potential bell cows. These are 3 down backs, as you mentioned, between Conner and White. And then the rest of the draft here, I went round 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 straight running backs, and I'll finish off at 21, 22. So that'll make it 7 straight running backs to finish the draft. and I'm going to just shoot for pure upside here. I'm looking for players that have a potential to move into a starting spot should there be an injury, should they maybe perform better in camp. We know that there is some situations with these players I'm about to mention where the coaching staff may choose to go with a hot hand approach. And so let's just start with 16-1 with Tajay Spears. We every year we look for that handcuff for Derrick Henry. The big dog's getting older. He's seeing 58-60% of the rushing share. If he goes down, who is the back that's going to step into place? And that to me is Tajay Spears. And that's why I took him here at 16-1. We know that we can expect him at least, fairly involved in the passing game as well. Yes, they just added Hopkins this week, which puts a little bit of damper in the passing game for what I was expecting to see out of Spears in his rookie season. But we just saw that Hassan Haskins got in some legal trouble, so that's one less back in the backfield. And so it really is just Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears here. And so I think that we can comfortably say that Spears is probably going to see 20 to 25% of the rushing share out the gate. And if the big dog goes down, we're talking about a potential RB2 on a week-to-week basis. Pierre Strong is another back that is kind of in the same situation for me. We saw Pierre Strong last year be very explosive in his limited opportunities. He only saw 10 rushing attempts last year, but he saw 100 rushing yards out of those 10 attempts. 7 receptions for 42 receiving yards and a touchdown. And so if we just look at from a pure breakaway run rate and explosiveness, it kind of reminds me of a Tony Pollard situation before Tony Pollard broke out. Super explosive back, someone who's going to be able to just hit a home run anytime he touches the ball. I mean, we're talking about a 20% breakaway run rate for his limited touches last year.
Comes out of what hit with that 40 time on Player Profiler? What percentage? What percentile is he in for 40 time? For
4.37, 99th percentile. Speed score is 113.5, which 95th percentile. Burst score is 86th percentile and 76th percentile agility score. We have him comped to Elijah Mitchell, but I see I have a fairly different comp there. I comp him more to like a Tony Pollard, in my opinion. I just think he has the ability to really break out. And we all know that Belichick and the Patriots have a way of working in running backs. And although I really like Ramondre Stevenson this year, we have to be ready to say that it's a possibility that Pierre Strong sees more of the workload than what we're anticipating. And so that could be in the passing game because Ramondre Stevenson saw the third most targets last year. Do they really want to give him that much on the ground and that much in the air? So there's a possibility. This is more of a hedge for me because of how much Stevenson I own in other formats. Do we want to see Strong see more of those touches? The other one I just took was Ty Chandler in the 18th round. It's another speedster, right? And we know that Madison has performed when given the opportunity, but I don't think that he's necessarily a bell cow like Dalvin Cook was. And I think that they may work in Ty Chandler, who's also very explosive, 4.38 speed out of North Carolina, 98th percentile, speed score, 93rd percentile. And we've seen him perform in a limited action as well. And so, I mean, he's only seen 6 rushing attempts last year. So I expect to see him touch the ball a bit more. And then just in case, I double tapped right here on this next turn, took Dwayne McBride to double tap the handcuff here for Minnesota in case Madison isn't the guy, or what if he goes down? Now I own both backs that are going to give me a chance to start another running back in case that White goes down or Connor goes down. This gives me some outs back to poker. And then lastly, I took in Keontae Ingram, which I mentioned earlier in the show to double tap with James Conner to lock in that backfield.
Yeah, that's smart. I mean, especially when it seems that consolidated on the depth chart too, right? It's not like if you do try, you can't really do that in places like Miami where there's 3, right? It's you spend too much on it. But if it's clear 2 guys like that, then why not? And the Dwayne McBride I just wanted to point out that because of the way we play Dynasty and because of the obsession with pass catching, a guy like Dwayne McBride, who only caught 5 passes in college, gets pushed so far down to the back of people's minds that they forget that he had 1,700 rushing yards in his senior season, right? Like this guy can run the football. That's why they drafted him. And guys like that, there are times where they come out and they're just the best rusher on the team. And it doesn't matter that they're not catching a ton of balls because they're scoring points by having 1,000 yards and having all these touchdowns, right? Like Alfred Morris, think about how many Jordan Howard, Jeremy Hill, like you don't need to catch 1 million balls if you are the best runner on the team. And it's not crazy. When you think about what this guy did in college, it's not crazy, right, Billy?
It's not crazy. I mean, we're talking about, was it 3,000 rushing yards and 32 touchdowns in 2 years in college in 21 and 22. We just saw them, lose Dalvin Cook. There's a reason why they were comfortable with Madison. They were comfortable with Ty Chandler. And they go out and get a back like Dwayne McBride, who can run between the tackles and is going to be able to use his power inside the red zone as well. I mean, it's a real possibility that he eats into Madison's workload. That's the reason why I'm not really in on Madison this year, just because there's a lot of options they could go here. They also added Addison. They have Hawkinson still. Of course, they have Jefferson. We could see a shift inside of the scheme to where it's going to be a lot more pass heavy, and then they're going to utilize a 3-man rotation in this backfield. So I think that we got to pump the brakes a little bit on Madison, and we have to start looking at the backup options as well.
The first time I heard that move was from the Podfather himself, your guy Matt Kelly over there. Years ago. The cheapest player in ambiguous backfields was the move, and we've seen it work time and time again, right, Britt?
I just have to say that I am so jealous that you got McBride where you did, because he went in the 12th round in my division in
Did he
SF.
really?
Yes, and I was so mad. I ended up getting Ty Chandler, which is fine, but I really, really wanted McBride, and so I just have to say I'm super jealous.
Man, 7 rounds later, that's awesome.
You're just bringing the jealousy to the show.
It feels good. We got Howard Bender in the chat, friend of both of ours there, and he says, baller backdrop, Billy. Do you make that yourself?
Oh, hell no, I can't paint. But we got that's a buddy of mine down south of Bend here. He made this one for me. That's actually on canvas, and it's across the whole wall. So it's 8 feet tall, 14 feet wide. Montana's probably about maybe 3.5, 4 feet tall. And so I got, of course, Jerry Rice, Montana. I got Craig and Ronnie Lott. Lott still has all his fingers, so we left him on there for him. But it turned out nice. The same painter did my other office before we built the studio down here just in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's badass, man. That's cool.
Yeah, I did not realize that was a canvas. I was like, yeah, that's just something that you one of those virtual backgrounds. But the fact that is a legit canvas makes it so much more impressive.
Yeah, people always think it's a green screen. I'm like, no, I can touch it.
That's
I can
crazy,
touch
man.
it.
That's impressive. So before we let you go, I want to ask you one last thing here. Today is a special day contract wise. 4:00 is the deadline for these guys that are franchise tagged to sign extensions. We saw Evan Ingram sign one this weekend before the deadline, and there's 3 running backs: Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard. Correct me if I missed one, but those are the main guys we're looking at now. Do you expect anybody to get something done, or are teams going to hold tight and say, hey, you know what? This is in the CBA. We just did the new CBA like a year ago. This is not changing for a decade. This is the situation. Which way? Do you think anybody does it? And if so, who would be most likely out of those 3?
I don't think we'll see anything done today. If we do see anything, and this is just put this in notes here. I have not checked Twitter today. So if something happened this morning, I am not aware of it. But if anything did happen, I think it would be Saquon Barkley, because the Giants are more in desperation mode with him, where I think that the Raiders, have options in the backfield. I think that Dallas doesn't necessarily have options, but they've been burnt by the big contracts with Ezekiel Elliott. And so I don't think that the Cowboys are going to fork up, $10+ million for a running back here again, anytime in the near future. But I could see where the Giants may get creative and work in a contract with Barkley, just because him and Waller this year are going to be the lifeline of this offense. And without Barkley, I mean, this could be a pretty ugly offense, quite frankly. And so I could see where they want to, Dable saying, hey, we got to pay our guy. We got to get him on the field. We got to get him part of practices. That's probably the most likely outcome. But I still think it is probably a long shot to get done today.
Exactly. Yeah. I think Jacobs probably the least likely, just because he's outwardly said that he doesn't like some of the moves they made. He didn't like they got rid of Derek Carr. He didn't like they traded Darren Waller. As far as coming together, the Giants do seem like the one where he wants to be there and they want him there. So it's just a matter of money. But anyway, Billy, thank you so much for joining us, man. You're the man. Let everybody know where they can find you, what you got going on.
You can find me on Twitter at FFMuzio. It's right down here inside of the screen. I'm over at Player Profiler, do all of our rankings and projections over there, and we just released our draft kit. I think both of you guys had some appearances in those, if I recall. So thank you guys for doing those. That is released, and that is a behemoth when we release that. It's 300 player takes. There's written content in all 300 takes. I got the analyst cheat sheets out there for various formats. I just got up 2 analyst cheat sheets in there. So that's a huge one to always get out every year, and you can get that over at Player Profiler.
Awesome, Billy. You're the man, brother. Thank you so much for joining us, dude.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Nice seeing you.
Thank you. Go pet that poster for me.
Oh, yeah. It's it's real. I was like, nah, that's a green screen. He's just messing with us.
No, you can touch it.
So it is real. All right, Billy. Thank you, man. Take care.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
So Billy, he's in, he's out. Coming up, we're going to have Britt got a couple games for us to play. Snack or Wack, one that I'm looking forward to playing. But then we're going to take a look at some coaching systems, some different personnel groupings. We're also going to have Joey Wright join us from Front Yard Fantasy and from Football Guys. So stick with us. We're going to hear something real quick from our guys over at FFPC, and then we'll be right back with all that.
Breece Hall right now, and I've talked to plenty of high-stakes players, I'm sure you have too, Kev. Had Hall not torn his ACL last year, he might have been the 101 in drafts this year. That's how good he was looking last year, and obviously with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. At the 305, running back 11 behind Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, right ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs and Najee Harris. Your thoughts on him as a mid-third round pick? How have you been attacking him? Have you been getting him at that spot so far this year?
Yeah, if I start out with 2 wide receivers, Breece Hall is right at the top of the queue coming into the third. If I knew he'd be healthy for week 1, I'm still a little.
Well, he'd be going higher than the mid third.
Right. He may go 101 or RB1 at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that even if he's healthy in spring and the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I still like if I'm running a team, if I'm the coach, I'm bringing him back slow. Like he's on a pitch count. Like I want him for the end of the season because I got Aaron Rodgers for the playoffs, right? Like even if he's fully healthy, I would work him in slow. But that is actually what you want. Like he's still going to get the high value touches. So yeah, if we know he's healthy, he's a first rounder. So like if he's sitting there in the third, especially when I get 2 wide receivers to start, I'll take Hall all day.
Yeah, it almost makes you think that the uncertainty with Breece Hall has made him unfairly fall too far, right? Like, right. Because we're talking about the team here in June. They're still hoping that he's ready for week 1. This is not, oh, we'll see what happens. Oh, we're taking it day by day. Oh, we're liking how he's coming along. No, they still think by week 1. And the fact that we have that timeline, I think, maybe bumps him up, especially as the drafting season gets deeper and deeper here in July and August. Maybe we start seeing him go up the boards as well.
Welcome back, guys. We've got some M&M going.
Let's go, dude.
And let's just vibe here. Thank you for joining us for the second half of Alarm Fantasy Football. I'm your co-host, Britt Flynn, joined, of course, by Andrew Cooper. We have a little bit of stuff to get to that we didn't get to in the first hour, specifically the news. We touched on it with Billy Muzio, our guest in hour 1, but the franchise tag deadline is in 2 more hours. And Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley have yet to sign. They've got 2 hours to get this done. And this is going to be very interesting to see if they actually sign or if they're going to hold out. So now for some popcorn headlines, since you know that is my favorite thing to do in the news segment. So Coop, Green Bay Packers running back A.J. Dillon says that everyone trusts quarterback Jordan Love and that they would, quote, run through a wall for him. Are we buying this? Or is this just some more hype?
I mean, it's just craziness. The honestly, though, I'm glad AJ Dillon. This is what I will say. I'm glad AJ Dillon actually did speak up and say this because I have not heard a lot of this hype. Like they usually when you get a new quarterback, whoever it is, they're just like, yeah, this guy's the man. He's the coolest. We like hanging out with him, and he's also amazing at football. There hasn't really been a ton of that with Jordan Love. Remember with Patrick Mahomes, those rumors were started even during the season before that when Alex Smith was a Pro Bowler and they went to the playoffs, right? They won 14 games and 12 games, and Alex Smith was back-to-back Pro Bowler, had probably his best statistical season. And there were rumors during that season. They're like, we got this kid in practice who's dynamite, right? Like, that all started. And then when he got the job, people were already like they were already amped up, right? Like the hype was already there. So it was like night and day in these two situations where when Jordan Love got the job and Aaron Rodgers got traded, people are coming in, they're saying, well, we got to bring him along slowly. And they're kind of pouring as much cold water on this hot seat as possible. So I'm actually glad AJ Dillon came out and said, hey, this guy's the man. I'll run through a wall for him. He's my best friend. Because that's what you're supposed to say. And I think Jordan Love needs more of that, right? Because I was starting to worry if people even thought he was good, like even his own teammates. Like, where's Christian Watson coming out saying, "Yeah, dude, he's the man, and I'm gonna have 1,500 yards." I haven't really heard enough of that either. So, what do you think,
Well,
Britt?
Christian Watson's bad because Jordan Love can't get the ball downfield to him. That's the issue with
That could be
Christian
it.
Watson. But I mean, I think of course that you're going to say this, but it would be a problem if you didn't. But my concern is that trust and production aren't the same thing. So AJ Dillon may have to literally run through a wall for Jordan Love if
Right.
LaFleur adopts that run heavy approach while Love gets his sea legs in this league. So training camp is going to be very interesting as far as that aspect goes. And then we have another one with Sam Darnold. No, it's not about the haunted pool house, but he pops up once again in the popcorn headlines. He says that he chose the 49ers because of their weapons. So, my question is if Brock Purdy isn't ready to go to start the season, do you think Darnold actually has the tools to utilize those weapons?
So the thing with Darnold is he
That sigh said it
it is
all.
a tough side, man. But the thing is, he does have some very interesting and sneaky tools. And there are a couple guys that Zach Wilson oddly falls into the same category where we have seen flashes of escapability from these guys. Maybe Zach Wilson probably tried to do a little too much last year, but these guys can move around a little bit. They're not. This isn't like Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins you're thinking about. So for what the 49ers have set up and what they can do, oddly enough, if Sam Darnold was the starting quarterback, I would move him ahead of a bunch of guys that are towards the back. Like personally, I don't really believe in Sam Howell, and I think that offense is much worse, right? Like Mac Jones, who I do like, is being put into a situation where his job is to be a game manager. He has zero mobility, Mac Jones, like zero point zero. So for fantasy football purposes, whoever is the quarterback of this team, I don't care who it is, Purdy, Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, the the floor of where I can rank them is like QB 24 or 25 because I just think there's five, and we play so much two QB, so much best ball now that 24 matters, right? Like in Superflex, 24 is starting for somebody. So I think there's just enough situations around this league where I look at it and I say, well, I'm not going to start like Colt McCoy, right? Like I'm not going to. There's just enough guys where I look at it and say I'm not starting these guys no matter what that give me Sam Darnold. Right. So I'm actually not as far out on this guy as others might be. Right. I don't know if you're just completely out. I mean, it would actually be reason if you said yes, I would say that's reasonable. Right. But part of me says whoever is the quarterback for this team is capable of scoring points.
Yeah, I actually think that Darnold does have the weapons or the skill set to utilize these weapons. And we've said it time and time again that basically anybody off the street could play in a Shanahan system. Um, but when Sam Darnold started for the Panthers last season, his cumulative QBR was 92.6 with the Panthers, with that kind of makeshift receiving core with really no weapons, a depleted defense. And now in San Francisco, he has a better line, a better running back, and better receivers. So I think he can be at least serviceable, if not better, in this system. And we just talked about the franchise tag. There is a new headline saying that Tony Pollard is expected to play on the franchise tag in 2023.
Interesting.
So I think that that situation is ironed out. Now that he is on the franchise tag, do you think that Dallas is just going to run him into the ground?
So
And then
I don't think they will, because I still believe they're going to bring somebody else in to offset that workload. It would be nice if they extended him and then did that and said, "Hey, we want you here for a while, and here's what we're going to do to help you." Bring back Zeke, his best friend's Dak, but obviously he has to put his pride to the side the way Joe Mixon did for that to happen. But that's what you would that's what I would want to see if I was Tony Pollard. Is I'd want them to, not put me in a position like that, because this franchise has done this before, and Jerry Jones does call the shots. People forget that DeMarco Murray, in that season, I think it might have been either 2014, 2016, he did it all for this team on the last year of his deal. He had like 400 touchdowns, and he broke his hand during the season and had surgery on it and didn't miss a game. So DeMarco Murray did everything you could possibly ask him to do, and what did they do? They turned around and said, you're all beat up now. We're not going to pay you. And then he had to go to the Eagles and the Titans, and his career was basically over. He basically had an entire running back career in one season for the Cowboys. So if I'm Tony Pollard and I see what just happened to Zeke, and now they're putting me on this 1-year deal, like, obviously you have to play your hardest. It's football. You get hurt if you go easy, but I would look for some sort of good faith move by this team to not just run me 100 times, a million times into the ground, because the league is too smart now. They try and sell these guys on, oh, you're going to showcase your talent and earn that second contract, but the league is now too smart to look at it and say, oh yeah, this guy had 1 million carries. That's a good thing. That's a bad thing now. So if I'm Tony Pollard, I'm saying, hey, meet me in the middle here at least, right? Pay me $10 million or $11 million, but can we use Malik Davis? Can we bring in Leonard Fournette or Kareem Hunt or Dalvin Cook or any number of these guys that are out there floating around, or bring back Zeke? So I don't know, Brett, you're a Cowboys fan. What would you like to see them do?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if Pollard has it in him to be that bell cow role, and we talked about it last week on the Alarm Fantasy Show. He's never had more than 200 carries in his entire career, and he's coming off a pretty severe ankle injury. So I don't know if his health can withstand all of that volume, but fingers crossed for Zeke coming back. That's all I'm gonna say. So we'll go with that. But
If the Cowboys win it all without Zeke, that would make me very sad.
It would make me sad. No more Salvation Army cattle jumps. No more just crop tops.
Bring him back.
Like none of that. Bring him back, Jerry. Bring him back. But we've got a bunch of stuff coming up for you here in this second hour. We've got Joey Wright on deck to play Snack or Wack, which is going to be very fun. We're also going to be talking about coaching systems and other schemes that kind of go overlooked that are in our draft guide. But we also have training camps starting tomorrow for 8 teams, and there are plenty of positional battles to be decided. As you know, my training camp battle article is up on fantasyalarm.com as part of the draft guide, and I'm going to be updating it like crazy as all that news comes in. You can get the draft guide on its own for just $26.99 by going to fantasyalarm.com/draft guide, or you can sign up for our All Pro access, which gives you access to every single sport, DFS and seasonal, as well as the draft guide. To sign up for our All Pro package, use promo code Howard for 50% off your first 6 monthly payments, as well as a 7-day free trial for total access to everything on the site. And I highly recommend it. You get access to the Discord, you get access to Coop, all that fun stuff. But let's bring Joey in, because I'm pretty excited to play Snack or Wack.
Get him in here. There he is.
Hey Joey, how are ya?
Well, I'm a little miffed. Brett reached out to me yesterday to ask me to be on the show. Said nothing about Coop being here, so I committed before I knew who was going to be here.
My arch nemesis.
I know. Not really, though. We love each other.
Not really. Well, that's the thing. That I talked to. I have a video on my Twitter where I talked to Mike Viella about this, And I feel like sometimes people that see us, on shows or arguing on Twitter, they don't realize that when you have friends like this, the rule is you're allowed to be mean on Twitter and on shows, but only to your good friends, right?
Yes,
So,
this is true. This is true.
yes, everyone's got those friends at home where it's all good fun. That's the most fun. So we like to have fun with you, Joey, and I'm glad you're on here. And you're with football guys, but you're also deeply with the front yard fantasy guys that we love. How about that rebrand, man? That is sharp.
Isn't it beautiful?
I love that, dude.
They know I can't keep a secret, so they just told me this morning about it. No. We've known for a while.
They knew you would have
really
ruined
excited.
it.
Yeah, like Joey's gonna run it if we
that
say
was
anything.
smart. Yeah. Oh man, I saw that. I was like, that is perfect. You know what's this is how good it is that I had to think to remember what the old one was. And then I realized it was like the red, right? I'm like, that's how good this one is. I was like, immediately saw it. And I was like, that's front yard fantasy. That's what I don't even know what this is it. That's it right there. So good job with that. That's very cool.
Thank you. I literally did nothing to contribute to it except just look beautiful. But no, it's really exciting. It's really exciting. But I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. This is going to be super fun. So snack or whack, the way that I have this visualized in my head is I want to talk about some polarizing fantasy players. We've all been out in the Twitter streets. We've seen the discourse about these specific players. And I want to know if you think that these players have delicious upside or if their fantasy value is whack. But to start off as kind of an icebreaker, I want to know Joey's favorite snack and then one that he thinks is overrated and whack.
I was told I was not allowed to say my wife is my favorite snack, so I'm gonna have to go for my second favorite snack, which would be yogurt raisins. I've got kids, and my discovery of loving yogurt raisins is one of my favorite things about being a father. They don't ever really ever get to eat them because I'm the one that gobbling them down. Just loves me some the white yogurt raisins. Delicious.
Yogurt raisins. I don't know if I've had yogurt raisins.
Go to your local supermarket. I'm sure they have them.
Is it like you just put raisins in yogurt? Like it's like wet?
I don't. No. It's like a hard yogurt. Like they dip them in yogurt, and then I guess it just kind of like.
Oh, that sounds pretty gross.
I really want to know how they make them.
They sit out in the
kind of delicious.
They put them in the sun, dude. That sounds terrible, dude.
Well, they put the raisins in the sun first.
You take yogurt, you put it in the sun, and then you feed it to your kids. That sounds great, dude.
Gets a little moldy, and then
But okay, so my whack one is that warm yogurt. Sun-baked
Coop,
yogurt.
what's your favorite snack?
Honestly, my favorite is beef jerky. Man, I love it on a good road trip. Although it does, depending on the one you can, it's not that cool to eat it on like a plane or in a car with people. But there's just so many different kinds, like a nice pepper or spicy beef jerky. That's my favorite one. And while I'm up, I'll get my whack one out of the way. It's not Joey's. I'm going to actually try that, whatever that is, the yogurt raisins. But honestly, overrated. So I want to make sure that no one gets this misconstrued because I really love soft pretzels. Soft pretzels are good. Hard pretzels are highly overrated. And the thing about the hard pretzels is everything else associated with them is far better than the pretzels. Like people are like, oh, you don't like them in hummus? I'm like, yeah, I like hummus. But it's like you can dip a million things in hummus. Right? Or people are like, oh, what about like those like candies that have pretzel in them? I'm like, dude, the candy is the best part. Like the pretzel is just an annoying dry part of the process. But it's always, and that's how I know that it's not the pretzels, because people are always like, oh, well, I like them with honey. I'm like, yeah, I like honey too. But pretzels are just, I think it's the worst vessel for delivery of better ingredients. So pretzels, right. I see that you guys might be disagreeing with that.
I was going to say, even though I disagree, I need to find Joey's whack snack.
My whack snack, I'll shout out our buddy Scott Fish. Like we both hate pickles. I don't get it.
Really?
Yeah. Whenever I curse in my household, the new thing, we used to have a swear jar, but then I started losing money. Now my daughters make me eat a little pickle, and it's like I've honestly cleaned up my act because they're so disgusting.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I hate pickles.
I love pickles. Dude. Pickles are great, dude.
So is it the dill that you like?
I like them all. I like the dill.
Okay.
I like the gherkins. I like the ones from Walmart that are like spicy jalapeno maple glazed ones. Like all of them.
The little sweet ones. The little sweet ones aren't bad. I will shout you out, Coop. The beef jerky. I killed a whole bag of beef jerky at Rocky Mountain National Park last week. I just tore through it.
It's crazy though, because like if it was less expensive, it's also like it's also fairly expensive for. I mean, I guess it is like steak, or whatever.
Yeah.
But like it is expensive. Otherwise, I'd eat it all the time. But yeah.
Britt, what are your snacks? What do you like?
Well, I eat anything and everything, but I really like. Actually, I don't even know. I don't snack. I like cheese. I like cheese.
You didn't have anything ready for this? You asked us and you didn't even think about a snack that you might like?
Well, I don't. Coop, I don't.
I know, you don't really eat at all. Yeah.
I'm like a little bird. But anyway, before this gets completely off the rails, I want to talk about some snacker whack before we run out of time with Joey, as far as fantasy players. So one that I have seen over and over again, especially after he got his big contract, is Lamar Jackson. And I want to like him. But Joey, what do you think? Is he a delicious fantasy snack or is he whack?
He's a snack to me. Over the last prior to last season, averaged just under 25 fantasy points per game as the starting quarterback of the Ravens. So anytime he's starting, he's averaging great points. Last season, he finished tied for 6th in fantasy points per game, even though he only played 12 games. It's the healthiest he's ever been. He's got a great supporting cast with Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, Odell Beckham Jr. is there now, and a rookie I absolutely love, Zay Flowers. I think it's all systems go for Lamar Jackson. There's not many things I don't really like about him this season. I think he's got QB1 overall upside.
And Coop, what about you?
Is that the snack sounder I heard in the background there?
Yeah, it is the snack. No, he said I got the whack sound, but I think it should have been the that's tasty. But Coop, what do you think?
We'll have to set that whole thing up. Yeah, I think the fan Earn Dog, I think you got to turn your fan off or whatever's going on over there. For me, dude, Lamar Jackson 100% a snack, and I'm willing to put my Scott Fishbowl team on it. I took him at 105 in the SFB, and I as we do on the show, verbal will retweet everything that Joey just said about the weapons, and I love that they're finally moving away from Greg Roman and his Roman era style of football that led them to be a bottom 5 team in pass attempts in 4 of the last 5 years. And Greg Roman's been doing that going all the way back to the Bills, all the way back to the 49ers. Just look at Frank Gore's stats, where for the first 5 years of his career, he's averaging 50 targets a season. And then Greg Roman shows up and that goes to 15. The offense that Greg Roman runs is not conducive to the things that give the quarterback the extra boost. Like, think about Justin Herbert. He had the 3rd highest passing yard total last year of any quarterback because the run game is kind of the extension of the pass game, right? Austin Eckler, all those little dump downs that are carries for other players, he gets all those points too. So I think this coach comes in, Todd Monken, with the air raid. There's going to be a lot more throwing and moving the ball around. But at the end of the day, you can't just turn off Lamar Jackson's ability to scramble for big chunk plays or punch it in himself in the goal line. So I think you're still going to get the rushing benefit. You're still going to get a guy that has 500, 600, 700 yards, but you also might get the Lamar Jackson that won MVP, the one that threw 36 touchdown passes. So snack me up, dude. Joey, I'm with you on that. That one, he falls into the yogurt raisins category.
So I didn't know if there was going to be a drop there or not. So I worry a little bit about his injury history over the past 2 years. I know that we say that we shouldn't predict injuries, but if he's going to pass more, then I'm a little concerned about his ceiling if he's not rushing. So taking him at QB5 when Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence are going almost a full round after him, I think I'll pass on him. So I think that Lamar Jackson is whack.
Whack. The interesting thing about the injury thing is that whenever we bring up the injuries for Lamar Jackson, somebody always says, well, he actually got hurt when he was in the pocket, right? So the narrative is all over the place on that one, Britt. Not even that I disagree, because he did get hurt 2 years in a row, and his play is conducive to that. But it's almost like, well, do we want him to run or do we not want him to run? I mean, what do we want? He's going to get hurt because he's passing in the pocket more, because that's what everyone seems to be suggesting. It's just I think the reality that people are missing is that the rushing does make you more prone to get hurt. There's
Yeah,
no doubt. There's no
I
doubt.
I would go with that. So following on our running back theme that we had going earlier, Travis Etienne going as RB13. He's been a very polarizing player in these Twitter streets. So Coop, is he snack or whack for you?
So the thing with him is that if his ADP were a little lower, then it's like beef jerky almost, where his if beef jerky was a little less expensive, I would have more of it. But his
A really good analogy, actually.
his ADP is too
Yeah.
high. So I actually have to put him in that whack category where I look at it and I'm like, if he were beef jerky, I'd pay. But I just worry that he really struggled in the aspect that nobody seems to care about except us in the fantasy analyst world, where we say, can this guy pass block and can he get on the field for those plays? Because the 2 minute drill is a lot more complicated than people think. You need to know all the plays, you need to know all the audibles because there's no time to substitute guys in or out. There's 3 plays being called in the huddle, and there's all the audibles happening at the line. And if you can't protect the quarterback in those situations, then you can't be part of that. Last year, JaMychal Hasty, the veteran, was the guy that was part of that. He earned that job. When it was 2 minute drill situations, he was the guy. So that's what scares me. The upside is there if he can become that guy. But if JaMychal Hasty or Tank Bigsby takes that particular role, that's a very high leverage part of the game that, that Saquon Barkley and Najee Harris and Austin Eckler, they're getting 40 of their receptions from that one part of the game, right? Where so if he's not in that, then I'm a little scared. So ADP is what has me scared, and I gotta say he's whack. Joey, what do you think?
No, I agree with you. RB13 is way too high for me. I'd rather have Mixon, Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones, guys in that range. What I think is going to be interesting, you kind of brought it up, Coop, is who's going to get the receiving downs work for this team. They went out and got Tank Bigsby, who he led Auburn in receptions last season. Like, what? Really? A running back? He did. So, I don't know why Jacksonville's so reluctant to let Travis Etienne get that receiving down work. He did pretty well with it at Clemson, but if he's not getting that, RB13 is way too high for me. So he's whack, just based on ADP.
Yep, I'm going to go a 3 out of 3. I think that he's whack. I think that he's got fumbling issues on top of everything else. Spending third round draft capital on a running back when we've seen time and time again that running backs are not super valued in this league. To me, that makes me think that his workload's going to be reduced. And scampers, you would love that. Beef jerky dipped in yogurt. I love it. We're talking the cat's language here. But I don't think that we see the volume that we're used to seeing him have. And I feel like you're drafting him at a ceiling. So yeah, for me, he's whack. Let's go to another very polarizing player. In a different situation, not necessarily on a different team, but Davante Adams, he has spoken out against how he doesn't like the Raiders front office, how he doesn't like how this offense is being run, but he's still being drafted at the end of the first or beginning of the second. So, Joey, do you think Davante Adams is a snack or is he whack?
I kind of like Travis Etienne at the ADP. He's whack for me. I'm kind of just letting people draft Davante Adams because I'm much more comfortable with the running backs that are going around the middle of the second round where Davante Adams is going in drafts. He's my wide receiver 10 behind Amon-Ra St. Brown and ahead of Garrett Wilson, but behind Garrett Wilson, but I could still see myself pushing Garrett Wilson up a little bit more. Like you said, he's not happy, with Carr being gone. We're not sure if it's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo or Aiden O'Connell. I just don't want any part of Adams. He's whack for me. The talent's there. He's one of the best wide receivers we've ever seen. It's just too many question marks.
Coop, what about you? Davante Adams, snack or whack?
So I actually was off on him in this offseason when, he was making those comments and doing all those things until I took a look at what the experts of all experts over in Las Vegas were cooking up in terms of odds. And when I first saw DraftKings and where they had him set, I thought to myself, this is wrong. Like, he's too high. They have him set at 1,300 yards, 8.5 touchdowns, which is pretty much where they have Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And so I was like, okay, let me take a look around. So I looked at FanDuel and I looked at Caesars, and they all have him there. They all are saying this guy is going to be himself. They have him as a top. Virtually every book has him at top 3 in yards, and they have him set 8.5 touchdowns, which is 8 touchdowns is more than enough for me, right? Like if you have 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns, what's the Joey? What's the farthest down you could finish in terms of wide receivers?
1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. Wide receiver 7, maybe.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
so, and that's where he's
6, 7.
going. So I kind of changed my stance on that when I saw that.
Yeah.
And in my big hometown league, for instance, and I've talked about this, is like when you have lines like that set, you can almost buy insurance. Like my main big league is $300 buy-in. So if I take Davante Adams, maybe I'll turn around and put $50 on the under and just say, hey, you know what? If this guy gets hurt or he stinks, at least I have this to cry into, because I mean that line is set where he's either going to be a rock solid wide receiver 1 or the under is going to easily be it's going to pay out. So interesting player in that set that I actually did change my mind. I had somebody call me a flip-flopper last year for doing that. And I was like, I didn't flip-flop. I got new information. Like this is science. Would you rather I ignore the information available? So give me the snack on that.
This is where we need the drop from the Big Lebowski saying, I've got new information, man.
New
I've got
information
it.
has come to light.
Like your buddy, man. Yeah.
So I want to say that Davante Adams is a snack, but he's kind of like an old candy bar that you find in the bottom of your purse. Like he'll satisfy your craving if you really want chocolate, but he's not in the same tier as like a really cold Snickers. With Jimmy Garoppolo and the state of the Raiders offense.
So there are snacks you like.
And the potential holdout of Josh Jacobs, I just think that he could find himself in some big trouble. So I'm just a little worried about him.
Let me say this real quick on Davante Adams is that if you go over to the FFPC, that's what we've been talking about. They're good friends of ours, and they have expert drafts where like that's where the big dogs be, right, Joey? Like that's where if you want to do like a $300, $500, $2,000 league with not that many people in it, where the winner gets $1 million, like where if you lose, you lose $2,000 though. But I mean, that's where if you want to play high stakes, that's where you should go. And when I look at the ADP over there compared to other places, Davante Adams is going farther down than you would expect. So when some of these other sports books have him at 1,300 yards, which is right where they have Justin Jefferson, right where they have Jamar Chase, for him to be going where he's going, I mean, Jefferson goes 1, Chase goes 2, Tyreek Hill is also at 1,300 yards. He goes 4 over there. He's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, wide receiver 10 after Amon-Ra St. Brown, after Garrett Wilson. Those guys are some of the sharpest of the sharp. I know the ADPs are very close between him and Garrett Wilson, but you got to take that into effect. And if you like Davante Adams like I do, what you should do, go over to FFPC, myffpc.com, sign up, use promo code ALARM. They'll match an instant $25 when you deposit 35 or more and take advantage of that, right? Like now that I've seen his ADP, I like him. I'm going to go over there and take him over there. Joey, you don't, so maybe you don't. But I mean, wide receiver.
I'll join the league with you though.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's split it. Well, maybe not $1,000. $1,000 each. You want to go? Maybe we'll do.
I might get in a little trouble for that.
Yeah, dude. The thing is, they have leagues as cheap as $5. They have best.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, maybe we'll do like a $50 one, $25.
Okay, I'll split a $50 team with you.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's lock that in over at FFPC.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, you get Davante Adams and I get Samaje P. Ryan, and then we'll just be fine. We both get a guy, and then we'll draft.
I think that's fair. An equal amount of draft capital used on both, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah, but check that out. I noticed that one, that FFPC, and that actually goes to the two you guys' point. Like the high stakes guys don't like him, so that's a little scary too.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think the high stakes guys are really sharp.
Yeah, where you were saying he was going as a wide receiver 10, like while I'm passing on him, I think that's fair. It's people taking him as like the 4th and 5th. Like I'm out on that.
Yeah,
which I've seen.
You can't do. I've seen it too, and I sometimes with guys like that, I like that when that happens, where I just like, oh, nice, somebody reached for that guy, and now I don't have to think about it, because he is a little scary, right? It's like, so I actually sometimes like when guys get reached on, and I'm just like, okay, I'm good, thank you for saving me from myself.
Yeah, it's like a life raft that you never asked for. But let's get a couple more in here before we have to let Joey go because the segment has gone way too fast already. But Calvin Ridley, what do you guys think about him? Coop, I think you're next. Snack or whack?
So again, this is another one where I look at the problem that I have with Ridley is this. When I think you got to go back to the end of his time with the Falcons. What I wanted to see from Calvin Ridley, and I know like he had a lot going on behind the scenes. Maybe he shouldn't have been playing at all. But what I wanted to see from him was Julio Jones just got traded to the Titans, and he had the opportunity to be the de facto number one wide receiver on that team, which also means you have to go up against Marshawn Lattimore, go up against some of these top tier dogs. I mean, go against Marshawn Lattimore twice a year because he's in the division. So I wanted to see him come out and not skip a beat the way Britt, your Angel CD Lamb last year. I mean, with Amari Cooper gone, he came out and he proved that he is the dude, right? That's exactly what you want to see. Ridley didn't quite do that. And I know he had stuff going on, but those 5 games were terrible. Like before it even, he even left the team, by week 3, I was saying, I got to bench this guy. I can't start. I didn't start him in week 4 or 5 at that point before all that stuff was going on. So I worry that now he comes back with a bit of rust. He joins a group that's been together for a year with Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. And maybe he's not even the top dog on his own team. I mean, it could be Christian Kirk. So I've just been kind of hanging back and taking Kirk where I can. The guy I'm really drafted is Trevor Lawrence. Because if you take Trevor Lawrence with all these weapons, then, you're playing with house money. If you take Calvin Ridley and ends up being Kirk, then it hurts a little bit. So he's actually going to go in the whack category for me, Calvin Ridley. What do you think, Joey?
Maybe I'm a little more in on him. I just think this offense with Jacksonville just looks so electric. And if Lawrence is going to succeed, I think Ridley has to succeed as well. I mean, Zay Jones is still there and Christian Kirk. I like we said about Christian Kirk, I'm going to have an article coming up next week with Football Guys about passing on certain teams' wide receiver 1s and taking the wide receiver 2. And this is one of the 2 I'm going to talk about, but I still do like the talent with Ridley. The last time we saw him play on the field when he wasn't dealing with the mental health issues that we know of, he was second team all pro with over 1,300 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. Because the 2 years off was due to a suspension and with the mental health stuff, if he's right, I'm not as worried as if it was like an injury. So maybe I'm a little more in on him. So I'll call him a snack because I don't mind his draft value where he's going.
Yeah, I think he's a snack all the way. He's the tastiest of snacks.
Ooh.
Again, we've only seen him in the shorts and not really anything in pads, but he looks good. I think he's going to be incredible with Trevor Lawrence in his 3rd season, and I'm totally in on him. So let's do one more before we've got to graciously let Joey get out of here. With the signing with the Tennessee Titans, DeAndre Hopkins. Joey, is he a snack or is he whack?
Snacky snack. I'm fine with him. I took him in the 7th round of Scott Fishbowl. I have been ranking him as my wide receiver 21 as if he was going to go to the Patriots or the Titans. So when the news dropped, was it yesterday or Sunday? I was like, okay, that's about where I thought he was going to be. He's been a top 10 wide receiver in PPR 6 of the last 8 seasons of points per game. He's a lead at his position. If Ryan Tannehill's one thing, it's efficient. When he's throwing the ball, he might not throw it a lot, but when he does, it's usually for points. I think Hopkins is going to be just fine. We've seen him succeed with Colt McCoy. I'm not worried about him. He's a snack for me.
Colt McCoy, amazing football name, but maybe not amazing. I mean, maybe the best football name ever, but never quite lived up to that. So you're right. I mean, yeah, we've seen Hopkins be good with a number of different players, and he's just his style of play. It translates to success with anybody, in my opinion. If you take a different player and a different good player, even at times, like some of these guys that thrive on, like if this was Brandon Cooks, I like Cooks where he is with the Cowboys now, but I wouldn't like him with this team because they probably end up being a field stretcher. He would be inconsistent. Tannehill can't really throw guys open. You don't have to throw DeAndre Hopkins open. You have to throw it anywhere in his vicinity. I've seen him catch balls through his legs. Right? Remember that catch? He caught it like through his legs, dude. He's caught it like one-handed up here. He caught the Hail Mary with 17 guys on him from the Bills. Like, it doesn't matter with this guy. So for me, I'm in. I'm disappointed that my boy Chig got pushed to the back of the cupboard.
Yeah.
But he's still a snack. He's just a snack for later when Hopkins inevitably has the decline that you do when you're a 30-something-year-old wide receiver. Maybe it's next year, maybe it's the year after, but that's what happens with tight ends. They look at Evan Ingram. He's a top 5 tight end one year. Then he goes on the back burner, comes out, finishes top 5. They bring in Calvin Ridley. Now he's back on the back burner. Dallas Goedert, same thing. They trade Zach Ertz. He goes up. They bring in A.J. Brown. He goes down. That's why tight end's so tough, man. So we don't stop liking the player, Chig, but the opportunity's not as good. Chig goes into the whack jar a little bit, and DeAndre Hopkins is front and center snack style.
Can I ask you how much you sank Chig in your rankings? Sorry.
I moved him down to so for me personally, I have to take anybody who has, in my opinion, is in the driver's seat to be a top 2 target on their team. And if he is going to be third, like I believe he is, I have to take the guys in the explosive offenses first. So I actually kind of already still had Goddard ahead, but it really solidifies guys like Kittle and Goddard ahead, because now if they're all going to be third on the team, then give me the guys that have proven they can do it, right? I also have to move him behind Njoku and Schultz, just because Schultz could lead his team in targets. I think Njoku versus Elijah Moore is a little more realistic than Chig versus Treylon Burks.
Njoku and Chig are who I'm struggling with right now.
Yes.
I still have Chig ahead of Njoku, and maybe I'm just not pumped on Njoku. I know we got off the rails there a little bit. Sorry about that, Britt.
No worry. Where I struggle is Kenny Pickett and Freiermuth in that situation, and whether I want Freiermuth or Chig, but it's you almost have to go Freiermuth there too. So it's getting kind of I'm probably moving him not too far, but he's where before I had him clearly ahead of guys like Greg Dulcich, and now they're right next to each other.
Yeah, beautiful.
But that's why we listen to these shows, because you get so much good information and so much good discourse. But unfortunately, it's time to let Joey go.
I'm not leaving. You're going to take me off.
So much fun playing Snack or Whack.
Just stay.
But thank you so much for coming on. Just tell everybody where they can find you and what you got going on.
You can find me in about 20 minutes right here on the Better Sports Network. Which is why we got
to let you go.
Yeah. We're playing Fantasy Jeopardy today. Simon and I are over there playing. Writing with Football Guys. The new Football Guys show just launched. Dave Kluge, Alfredo Brown, 5 days a week. I'll be on there. It's randomly, I think maybe like once every 2 weeks or so. So yeah, check that out. First show dropped today. It was really good. I listened in the car today. So yeah, lots of good stuff going on. Oh, see everybody at Expo when you're there.
We will see you at the Expo. Hopefully you bust out the big hat, and Simon does not give me any old cheeseburgers. Thank you, Joey.
Take it easy. I'm over there looking at the YouTube for Front Yard Fantasy right now, and the branding is up there. It's looking nice. You can catch that show on our channel as well, Fantasy Alarm channel on YouTube or Better Sports Network. I mean, we all work closely together. We do our best to stream it to multiple channels. So make sure you're subscribe to Better Sports Network. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button to get this shows, to get that show. I mean, we're doing moving forward. We're in one form or another, Britt. It's going to be you, me, Howard, Kevin Tompkins, John and Pemba from 1 to 3 every day, getting you the hard hitting facts. And then you get to play the fun games with Front Yard Fantasy right at 3:00, which are always a blast. They always have great guests. So make sure you're subscribed to the Better Sports Network YouTube so you don't miss any of that.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a ton of fun stuff coming up. And speaking about fun stuff and also important stuff, I want to dive into the latest Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide article. And I'm not going to say it's a doozy, but it's very important and very technical. Howard Bender puts these out every single season, and it is the coaching systems article. It breaks down every team, their offensive schemes, who benefits the most from it, their defensive schemes. And this is so often overlooked by people who play fantasy and DFS, because you need to know what coaching system this team or this player is in, because so many times we like to live in the past and we're like, well, if player X did this last season, surely he'll do it again this year. But that's not the reality that we live in. There's so many changes in head coaches and offensive coordinators. For example, this year there were 16 new offensive coordinators, and sometimes guys don't succeed when these systems change. In case anybody remembers Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos last year. So it's so important to know these systems, know how these individual players fit into them. And today, the first of these articles dropped, and it breaks down the AFC East. I'm not going to give you the entire article. You'll have to buy the draft guide for that over at fantasyalarm.com/draft guide. But I will give you the highlights. So, Coop, what types of offensive systems are broken down in these articles, and kind of what can you expect from these offensive systems?
Yeah, there's no like so I always obviously read all you guys' content. Like you and Kev have been crushing it so far with the best ball stuff and the especially with the zero and the hero RB articles. But they I always check out Dan Malin's his offensive line rankings because that's what I have the least exposure to, right? Like the stuff that we do a ton of best ball. How many best ball drafts have we done live on air, Brett? Like one every week for forever, right? Like
A bazillion. I've
a
lost count.
bazillion. So, but the offensive line stuff, that's deep dive research that Dan Malin does. And this coaching stuff is huge. I'm so glad Howard does it every year. I've been reading it every year, even before I worked at Fantasy Alarm, because not only does he break down the systems, but he tells you which ones are new. Like you can see, he puts right in there, first year in the system, second year in the system, breaks down all the different types of defenses, all the different types of offense, right? So if you go in and just read this one article, the first one, you should read them all as they drop. But if you just read the first one, it'll explain all these terms that you keep hearing and you might not understand. Like when earlier in the show, I said the Erhardt Perkins often modified Erhardt Perkins. If you sat there and said, "What the heck is that?" This article answers that question. It's a system that the New England Patriots have famously used for a long time. It goes all the way back to the 70s, but the current version that most people use was kind of modified by Charlie Weiss, and it's an offense that is supposed to be made to be very easy for the quarterback, and at times is more difficult for some of the other players. That's why sometimes you see players show up in New England and they say, "I'm out." Like Reggie Wayne showed up and he was like, "This isn't fun," right? So yeah, that's what it is. It's all in there. So go in there, check it out. He covers the West Coast. That's one that people are very familiar with. Air Coryell, which is a version of the spread offense. He covers the spread offense. He covers the air raid, which is a newer one. So all that's in there. Make sure you check it out. And then he breaks down the personnel groupings too. 11, 12, 13, all that. Again, there's no time to go over all that on the show, but that's the beauty of this is that he tells you what it all is, and then he says, here's who uses it, and here's what that means. And that is everything here, right? That's how you take your games to the next level.
Yeah, so I think we can cover a little bit of it because I think that it is so important. If somebody hears an air raid, okay, that's just like it sounds. Like it's a pass happy offense, like they're passing all over the place. That makes sense. If you hear like the West Coast offense, it doesn't exactly sound or act exactly how it sounds. Like there's more emphasis on passing than running, but it does use those short and intermediate passing routes to set up the run game and eventually longer passes. And basically, everybody out of the Shanahan coaching tree are big fans of this system. Like you look at what happened with the Miami Dolphins last season. Tua loved to throw the deep ball, but that was due in part to faking out defenses with the short yardage passes and the receiver's ability to gain yards after the catch. Miami utilized a ton of slants and short yard passes to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle within this system. And then they relied on their speed to outrun defenders and gain yards. If you don't believe me, Tyreek Hill ranked 5th in YAC and Waddle ranked 10th. So even with a mid run game, like with Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, the Dolphins still finished the year with the 8th most yards per game. And if they bring in Dalvin Cook, this system is going to work to perfection. And so it's very important that you understand all the ins and outs of these schemes and what they bring to the table. And something that's also within these articles is defensive schemes, which people don't really care about defense because in fantasy football, you're not playing defensive players. You're playing your skill position players and that's it. But you need to learn the defensive schemes because if you go by the mantra of play your studs and start your studs, then you're going to be left wondering, well, why did Justin Jefferson only have like 4 points against the Eagles? Like what happened last year? It's because you didn't understand the scheme and you didn't understand the coverage. So, Coop, can you offer a little bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the biggest part of what Howard does here is that he doesn't just say, like, the article doesn't just say, okay, this team runs the West Coast and they run a 4-3, right? It goes into the in-depth of how they're building it and how they're utilizing it. So last year with the Jets, he talked about how Robert Saleh came over, or the year before last when he first came over, the team was a 3-4, and his defense is a 4-3. That's why, guys like Anderson were immediately like let go, because they just don't. Henry Anderson was just a good player that was let go, was picked up pretty quickly because he just cannot, he doesn't fit into the scheme. So that's why that if a team like that, if that's happening, and it's what we're seeing right now with the Cardinals, which that article is not out yet, but the Jets one is, when a new coach comes in, he's changing the scheme completely. That's why some of these over-unders for teams is like 4 wins, because they haven't even built it yet. Now you look at the Jets, and they've built everything that they're doing, right? So with the defenses, it's important to notice that, because those matchups, Robert Saleh for the last couple of years, I mean, last year he turned it around really quickly. But that first year, you could look at it and say, this team doesn't even have the pieces they need to run the defense. I want as many Jets matchups as I can get, right? So that's what this article gets into. And the same goes for the offenses. He didn't just say it's West Coast. The Britt just talked about the 49ers. She talked about the Dolphins. But those teams, when Howard gets into it and he says, look, Kyle Juszczyk for the 49ers, and he said this last year in his article, and it was true. He said, Kyle Juszczyk for the 49ers played 40 to 50% of the snaps. This team went out, the Dolphins, and paid Alec Ingold a boatload of money to come in and be the fullback. You better believe that guy's going to play a ton. And what happened was he played a ton of snaps, and that made the targets highly consolidated among the guys that actually catch passes, which ended up being Waddle and ended up being Tyreek Hill. Looked a lot like Debo and Brandon Ayuk, didn't it? So that's what this tells you. Is it foreshadows what is going to happen with this offense based on what we know about these guys, even if it's their first year there, right? So that's why this is so important. Is Howard is telling you, here's what we know, here's what might happen with things that you're not thinking about yet. And guess what? There's another team in the Houston Texans that now has 2 49ers coaches coming over, in D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick. And you know what the first thing they did was, Britt? They went out and
They got a fullback.
They went out and paid Andrew Beck 2 years, $6 million with $4 million guaranteed, which for your fullback, $4 million guaranteed is that's no small amount. So they're doing the same thing. So that's what you got to look for in this. And that's only just one example of what Howard does here. He goes through and he ranks the down to the tight end coach. Like, he talks about the tight end's ability, the defensive coordinator like Vic Fangio with the Dolphins. Like, it really is one of my favorite articles, because he makes sure that every single thing is covered. That here's what's changing, and here's what might work. And it's why a lot of times the teams that have the least amount of change are the ones that are the most predictable. And why for years, as long as we didn't want Eric Bieniemy to leave the Chiefs, right, Brett? Like, we want it to stay the same. So when you look around this article that Howard lays out, what are some changes that jump out to you for some of these teams in terms of the systems?
So I want to talk about the Ravens, because Howard does talk about the personnel, and he does an excellent job of breaking down personnel packages. And a lot of people don't, necessarily think about that. You don't want a slot receiver on a team who runs a bunch of 12 personnel, because that slot receiver is going to be the odd man out. In the Ravens, I know that Todd Monken's coming in. I know that, they drafted Zay Flowers, who's supposedly excellent out of the slot. But with Mark Andrews and with Isaiah Likely, I can still see them running a bunch of 12 personnel and Zay Flowers still being the odd man out. I think that's an instance of a team that has changed at head coach and OC, or changed at OC, that isn't really going to change their system that much.
Now that really, Britt, I'm glad you brought that up, because the thing is, the personnel hasn't turned over yet either. So even if you're not gonna, we saw this with the Vikings last year, where people were like, KJ Osborne's going to come out and play all these snaps. Well, Kevin O'Connell couldn't turn over that he can't just turn it all over in 1 year. So CJ Ham was still under contract, and they still use the fullback CJ Ham. That's why, as you point out, if you use that fullback, you use that extra tight end, KJ Osborne, snaps aren't there, right? And once again, they just signed Josh Oliver. They still have Ham. They might not be there. I look at this team, Britt. You know what back led this backfield in snaps last year? And I use using the word back is kind of the giveaway.
Oh, I don't. No.
So it was the fullback, Patrick
Oh,
Ricard.
it
Actually,
was.
last
Okay.
dude, he played 63% of the offensive snaps last year, and he's still on the team. He might start the year on the pup list, but Britt, to your point, if they're using Isaiah Likely and they're using Patrick Ricard, we might get one or two of Bateman, Odell, or Zay Flowers that are playing a full snap share, but one of those guys is going to disappoint most likely. So very interesting point with that team. Next year, they might be able to build it exactly how he wants it, but they got too many contracts right now, guaranteed contracts, to do that right away. So,
Yep. And that's why it's so important to watch these training camp battles, watch how everything plays out. Definitely pay attention to all of these coaching system breakdowns because I cannot stress to you enough. If I had a table, I would bang on the table. This
yeah.
is one, if not the most important article out of the draft guide. Again, you can get the draft guide $26.99 over at fantasyalarm.com/draft guide. Or if you just want to be with the rest of the cool kids, sign up for the All Pro package, get access to every single sport that we have to offer. Use promo code Howard for 50% off your first 6 months and you can be part of the family. You get Discord access, you get access to the lineup generator, all the playbooks, everything that you could ever want is all included in that package. Coop, do you have anything else to say about these offensive systems? Because I know that we could talk for hours and hours about this, but we're running up against it,
I
and I
didn't
want to get
realize we
some
were up
final
against.
thoughts.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were up against the time here. But yeah, I mean, it is so crucial. It's a huge part of what I do, and I'm just glad that Howard does the legwork that he does because it does take a village out here, right? If he didn't do it, I was gonna have to do the research before I do my stuff. So it's just it. If you're anyone out there that likes to tweet about football, likes to create content, it's like getting the spark notes to all these teams, and it's a research that can be done for you. And then it's so much easier to say, yeah, I read Howard Bender's stuff than to sit down and go through and do it all yourself and look up, what Bill O'Brien's been doing for the last 10 years or what these guys are doing, with the spread offense that he's bringing to town, the movement that goes on there. So definitely check that out. That's all I have to say on. I don't want to give too much away of Howard's info, but this article is so it's so dense. Even and it's going to be 8 articles. He's doing one for each division. But if you just read the first one, it'll give you a lot of keywords. The rest of them will all lay out what everything is. So definitely jump in there, check that one out, dude. That's one of my favorites, and I learn something every time I read it, and I do this every day. So that's how there's deep cuts in there.
Well, and it circles back around to what you said at the very beginning of the show. We want to teach you to be better fantasy players on your own. And reading this article is how you do it. Just get involved, get your own process, and then we can bring a man a fish and feed him for a day. We can teach a man to fish and feed him for the rest of his life. And that's what we're trying to do here. But there are, like we mentioned, several articles to watch for this week. There's all the coaching systems. The cheat sheet is coming out shortly. We also have a bunch of shows coming up. Join us tomorrow for a better morning at 8 a.m. Eastern. We've got Lightning Round Fantasy with me, Coop, and Kevin Tompkins at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then we've got Alarm Fantasy Football at 2 p.m. Eastern. We're all over the place. So join us in the chat. Let us know everything that you guys have going on. Please stay tuned for the new and revamped Front Yard Fantasy coming up directly after this with Joey Wright, who you just saw on the show, and all the other amazing content on a Better Sports Network. So for myself, Britt Flynn, and my amazing co-host, Andrew Cooper, we will see you guys tomorrow.
Cheers, gang.